Welcome to Reminiscing, our Highline History, a radio show presenting the memories of our community in the Highline area at 106.5 LP FM, South King County. Listen to a new episode every week with your host, Roger Price. Ready for more stories?
Good afternoon. I'm Roger Price, and I'm a volunteer here at the Highline Heritage Museum. And today I'm going to interview Gary Long, who was a Burien city manager here from 1998 until 2005. So he was involved in a lot of the building of the town square and the city hall and the library and all those different things. So Gary, welcome. And I'm happy that you could do this with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes. And maybe you could tell us about how you got involved in Burien or how it all transitioned or.
Well, I got invited to apply for the job of city manager. And I arrived here and looked and I thought it needs a lot of work. But it looked to me like one of the best challenges that I'd ever have in my career. So I took the job in 1998 and took over a very young community and young city council. They were still norming and storming about how government should work in Burien. And we began trying to not only define what we would do with the rebuilding and revitalization of downtown, but also the rest of the city's infrastructure. That had all been neglected for years. So the challenge was both an economic challenge to revitalize downtown and then searching for and acquiring the resources to rebuild the parks, the streets, our stormwater system, and all of that was on my plate when I arrived in 1998.
Wow, so it was a big task ahead, but you transitioned into it. And what was some of the big headaches, I should say, or that were in front of you at that time?
The big what?
The headaches, yeah. The
headaches?
Well,
the headache is always for a city manager dealing with the city council.
Oh.
And then if the city council makes decisions, that often brings out disgruntled people in the community. So you have those headaches on a daily basis because the whole job of being the city manager is helping the council make decisions. And as soon as the decision is made, some people are going to be happy and some people are going to be unhappy. So you always have the responsibility to manage the social dynamic and keep things as constructive as possible.
So had the city of Burien acquired that property where the town square is now?
No.
Or was that done while you were in office there? Or
well, the city of Burien had only just recently completed its comprehensive plan and defined a gathering place in the downtown. And that was as far as that. Of course, there were goals about economic revitalization. But the question was how to do it. We had a pending third runway project and conflict with the airport. And we had really no plan beyond let's have a gathering place and create a livable community. So we had to go through a couple of years of planning. We made a particularly detailed effort at planning and revitalizing Southwest 152nd as our main street. And while we were doing that project, we started to acquire the properties around City Hall, the old Gottschalk properties, and the Educational Services building.
Right.
And we partnered with the library to develop a plan for a library City Hall project as part of the public investment on the town square. City also gathered the resources and did the design on the town square itself, and then negotiated with urban partners from Los Angeles to do the condominium development.
Oh, yes.
So that all took about 3 or 4 years to put together, to get all the pieces of the puzzle gathered and put us in place to start the design and reconstruction.
Yes, and then you had to deal with meal makers, and I think it was Bartell, and they had to be moved. And
yes, they were not consistent with the new downtown plan to have multi-story and livable spaces in the downtown. So they had to be relocated, and negotiations to do that is always very tricky, very conflict ridden. Somebody, again, very angry about the change. But I think it all came out in the end as a good design, and it's positioned Burien to take its place in King County as a significant city, as opposed to a city that was just struggling to get its feet on the ground.
yes, well, I know that when Urban Partners now, that was yeah, like you say, out of LA, weren't they?
Right.
And they came on board, and they were the builders, and weren't they, or the
Well, they were our partners in terms of designing a livable and commercial center for downtown Burien, and trying to define the development standards that we needed to employ, the development strategy we needed to employ to attract the investment.
yeah, and at the time that this was all transpiring, the economy was going great guns at that
It was
particular
going
time.
great guns in
Yes.
2004 and 5.
Uh-huh.
By the time construction and the first phase of Town Square was completed, we were into the crash of 2008 and 2009. Urban Partners completed its part of the project, and had there not been a failure, a bank failure of the financing bank in Chicago, the project would have gone more smoothly. With the failure of the bank, the federal government took over the financing, and that took a couple of years to unravel and get the property on the market.
Oh yeah, it was just unfortunate that it happened at that time. Yes, and it was like a lot of things. It's feast or famine during up and down years. So
Well, there's a cycle of development, and Burien was very lucky to be on the right side of the upswing in the market and get commitments for new infrastructure. We got several $1 million of financing for our downtown streets from the state and from the federal government. Our congressional delegation in Washington, D.C., and our state delegation were really the ones that made it financially possible for the city to be a standing partner with urban partners.
Mm-hmm.
Had we not been able to do the infrastructure, the project would have never happened.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's fortunately it all came together. Yeah, so it worked out, but it was
It was
probably some lean times too in
it,
there.
it was good timing, and had the economy not been on the upswing, I don't think Burien would have seen the project happen.
Uh-huh.
Um, the financing in Chicago was the result of our inability to get financing here locally. Um, when we sought financing from local banks and financial institutions here in Puget Sound, we could not find help. So
Oh,
we searched the country and ended up with the Chicago Bank. Unfortunately, when it went bankrupt, it slowed our progress down for a few years. But today, the vision about what should happen in downtown Burien is pretty clear. It's still happening.
mm-hmm.
It'll continue to happen. And the standards are still in place for more dense development, more people to live in the downtown, and an interesting arts and culture focused community to attract people to want to live and shop and enjoy downtown.
Yes, absolutely. So that we have that. It's coming along very well. So you were also involved in the museum right here where we're at today.
Well, yeah, one of my first encounters after arriving, and this is part of uh, the challenge of a new community, is everybody's got an idea and they all think theirs is the most important and should happen first. So one of the first people I encountered was Cindy Up the Grove. She arrived at City Hall and she was ready to build uh, a museum, or wanted to be ready to build a museum. But it was only an idea at that point. There was not property available or a plan for where to put it. I wanted it to happen because I thought it was an important cultural asset to help anchor arts and culture in the downtown. And that was part of our downtown plan, was that the city should have a string of pearls of interesting art and cultural activity intermixed with the business, the restaurants
Mm-hmm.
and bars in the downtown to attract people to spend their money here and enjoy their own community.
Yes, that's a very key part. Yeah, I agree with that. That's very good stuff that and you were yeah, you were part of the ground floor at that point, you and Cindy and whoever.
Well, when we were doing the Main Street project, we discovered um, property owners who were willing to sell the property on the corner of Southwest 152nd and Ambaum, which was an ideal spot for the museum. So we worked with Cindy and with the Highline Museum while I was city manager, and put together a property agreement. And the museum began to pay off a mortgage, uh, not a bank mortgage, but a land sale mortgage or contract with property owners. And I don't remember exactly when we completed the acquisition, but I think it was about 2005. I think it was about the time I left and retired from my city manager's role. Um, but with the property, we had a future museum. Then we had to assemble the plan, the design, the plan, and we had to take two major efforts. One was the larger museum, which possibly or probably could have happened had we not had the 2008 crash.
Mm.
With the crash, we had to resize the museum and build what we have today. And Cindy and other members of the board, again, our state and our federal delegation were extremely helpful in getting the financing through state grants.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah, that's very important, all those different grants that are
Well,
involved.
we had private donors, but the private donors only make up a small portion of what it costs to build a cultural facility like a museum.
Uh-huh.
So often cities, you take an old building and gift it to the Historical Society for museum purposes, but we didn't have one in Burien. Burien City Council did contribute funding for the acquisition of the property, but again, that was a small portion of what the overall funding had to be to acquire the land and build a project.
Yes, and I know they they wanted to kind of save this building, but it was just thinking about it, it was probably built around 1920, so it had seen better days, and the wood was probably starting to deteriorate enough where it would have been way more money just to redo it than start from scratch and build up.
Well, the building was not suitable in its original design for a museum.
Uh-huh.
So we tried to save the facade, and that collapsed during the construction.
Oh,
So we just had to redo the entire building.
oh,
And trying to do with one of our big challenges was trying to build a modern museum space, a very constrained land and building dimensions, and get all that done with the building that met the development standards for Old Burien, which are uh, they're different than the rest of downtown, trying to keep um, the neighborhood intact here in Old Burien, which has its own feel.
mm-hmm. Yes, I remember I used to walk by this building a lot of times when I was after I'd retired, and I'd see the workers working in this new building, and I remembered when it was a Bartel many years ago. They had a magazine rack that in the windows that looked right out onto 152nd, and you could watch the people go by. But that's when I started thinking, well, I'd kind of like to. They had a sign that said volunteers needed, so got the phone number and I talked to Nancy, and it was just before that we moved into this building in 2018 or 19. Yeah. And so that's the rest was history. I just got involved with it then, and it's been fun ever since. So
Well, it was a 25-year journey for me
oh
between the time I became city manager, met Cindy, agreed to work on the project. And then I ended up serving on the board for at least 10 years, I think,
okay.
after I retired as city manager. So I'm proud of what the community put together as a plan. I think Nancy has been a very imaginative, creative museum director. And I know there's always a struggle for funds with these smaller cultural organizations. But I think the museum is on a firm footing
Yes.
with its program and with its finances.
Yeah. Well, yes, I believe you're right about that. Yeah. We're keep trying anyway. That's the whole thing. So yeah, that was so then as you kind of phased out, you've kind of gone into retirement mode and you're just enjoying things right now.
Well, I'm of an age in which I'm eligible to be retired.
Yes.
So, yes, I retired from the museum board in, I think, 2021 or 2022. I can't remember exactly. And I volunteered and did some work for the Burien Actors Theater, BAT. But when I was done with their projects, I just decided I was going to retire altogether, and I'm enjoying that decision.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you had a good career. I mean, your time as city manager was during an important part of Burien's growth. So I think it was an awesome job that you've done. So that's pretty neat. And then I don't know if you had hobbies other than just being involved in community affairs, but yeah, that's fun stuff.
Well, I would say my main hobby has always been public service. And I have been involved in government even from high school and college days when I was on the student council
Oh,
and served as an officer. So, I did that for 50 or 60 years. And um, and now I've set it aside and I'm enjoying being retired.
you bet. Yes. Well, you're sure welcome here anytime you're in the neighborhood. So
All
that's
right.
good deal. Well, gee, this has been fun, Gary. I appreciate you coming by and give us a little history of when you were an official here in Burien, and we will go from there. And so thank you very much.
Good speaking to you, Roger.
Okay, great.